Mr. Healy.
All right.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Larry?
I'm good. We're out here at King of the Hammers 2021. This is my 10th year in a row covering this event. I love this event so much. How are you guys doing? Welcome to another episode of Hoonigan Autofocus. We got something really special today. We got the new Ford Bronco race truck, or the rock crawling race truck, correct?
Yeah, I mean we're calling it the Bronco inspired Ultra4 truck, and it the body lines, everything about it, you know, are inspired from the new Ford Bronco, which is so exciting to see that coming back. You know, it's been 20 years, all the hype, such an iconic vehicle, and to see them come back and want to get involved with Ultra4 and King of the Hammers, and you know, Vaughn and I teaming up to make the Fun Hammer off-road team. It's just so much cool stuff going on right now.
So, okay, let's start from the beginning. How many years have you competed in King of the Hammers?
So I had no race experience whatsoever. 2009, I came out here for my very first year. Qualified well. I qualified about second. This old, clapped out, beat up, not a race truck, just a rock crawler. It was my hobby or my passion, and got hooked. You know, I came out, broke the car in half, like lit it on fire 8 miles into the race. But I mean, it was that thing that hooked my soul and was my passion and my love. Went home, built a semi-competitive race truck with a second mortgage from my house, and came back and won King of the Hammers the next year. So it escalated from then. So this will be my 13th, 14th year racing King of the Hammers. You know, I've won it a couple of times, won more championships and races than any other Ultra4 driver out there. It's been a crazy career with no racing experience whatsoever. So just kind of came and figured it out.
So King of the Hammers, for those of people who don't know, it is, a lot of people say it's the toughest one-day off-road race in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can vouch for it. I've raced Baja 1000. I haven't been over to Dakar, so I don't know, you know, the intricacy of that, but it's a gnarly day. I mean, the rocks are something that a lot of the crossover drivers have never been able to figure out. You know, the Robbie Gordons, the Rob McCachrans, the big names have came out here and tried to do it, but the rock crawling aspect of King of the Hammers and these big boulders that are the size of Volkswagens that you have to drive through, they haven't been able to figure it out. So, you know, out of everybody, Vaughn's been the one that's been able to get out here and actually figure out the rocks and finish the races, you know, and do well in the series, and has really become one of the top drivers in the sport. It's been really neat to watch.
Well, he's not afraid to skinny pedal it at all. I mean, coming from the drifting side of things. Okay, so you as a king of the Hammers, there's not that many kings, really.
There isn't. Up till last year, there was only 5 of us. Josh Byler and all of us had repeated, and the same people keep winning for the same reason, that it's so tough to figure out how to get through this race and then be there to win at the end. But Josh Byler actually was the first new king in quite a few years last year, so pretty neat for him.
The thing is that really surprises me every single time. I mean, the first time I came here, I was blown away because the variance in speed. Like, you could be going through the desert. Well, like, what's the top speed of this truck?
125, 130.
And sometimes you actually hit that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The dry lake beds, we get out there and get to rip for a few miles.
And then you basically get to half a mile per hour.
Yeah, we gotta, you know, completely change your mind and your focus and shift into low range, and you have to crawl and make sure you're in the exact perfect spot in these rock canyons, and you have to be looking out, you know, 50 yards or so, positioning yourself for the next climb as you're climbing this one. And that's what a lot of people can't figure out. They get to that climb and they didn't position the truck right, and they're in trouble, and they're not making it through that section. They're rolling over, you know, having problems.
Okay, so I've been photographing you for 10 years now, and the thing that I know when you're coming around right away, because you have this distinctive red light in the front of your truck, LEDs, for whatever reason. And it's just cool because it's like, it's easy to spot, and then everybody has kind of their distinctive style, I guess, right? You know, when I see certain drivers come, I'm like, oh man, it's going to be a good show, you know? Like Levi Shirley, Shannon Campbell, you know, like Eric Miller, like the guys, you know, there's the normal amount of drivers that come through, like, because it's such a big field. It's like, how many is it this year? 150 or something?
Yeah, I mean, in the 4400 class and the limited class, last year there was right at 100. They've built a couple other classes for people to race in through the years. It used to we raced one class and run what you brung. The other classes have taken some of maybe the less competitive drivers and gave them a place to be competitive. So we have the 4800, the 4600, the 4500 class. UTVs are racing out here. We got trophy trucks and spec trucks out here racing. I think overall competitors with the dirt bikes, there's like 500 competitors or something out here racing this weekend, but our class by ourselves will be somewhere around close to 100.
Well, let's get into the truck itself, because I can talk about King of the Hammers all day.
For sure.
So Bronco body, first time it's ever run. In fact, as of this filming, it hasn't even been released yet. So by the time you guys see this, it's going to be released already. But this is super top secret. But this truck itself, how old is this chassis?
This chassis was actually built 5 years ago by Paul Herschel. It was mimicked after my single seat truck, the Red Dragon, which, you know, won a ton of races in it, starting about 2015. And he kind of went with the same layout with the motor offset like a Pro 4, single seat truck, front engine. When I sold my single seat truck, I wanted another one, and I wanted to convert it to Ford power plant, and kind of knew what we had planned. So that's why you got a loud race truck in the background. But that's why we went with this setup, and bought a proven chassis that Paul had been racing for years in it. So put a Ford D3 460 cubic inch, essentially a trophy truck motor, and just kind of made everything on here mine of the parts that I've been using for years.
So, and how much power is this thing putting out?
This makes about 760 horsepower. Jeff Ginner, JGRE, built the motor. I've been working with him for years. He does a ton of trophy trucks and class ones and stuff like that. And it's been a very great, reliable, very torquey motor, which is something that we need in the rocks. It makes actually about 700 foot-pounds of torque. So it's a lot of torque, and we don't want real high revving motors that don't make power until they get high up into the RPMs. We need that low bottom end torque for crawling through the rocks. So.
I mean, the thing is, there's so many strategies when it comes to something like King of the Hammers. Like, for example, independent, potentially you have an advantage in the desert then, huh?
Absolutely. The independent trucks are by far faster in the desert, but this year I've been out pre-running the rocks a little bit, and they've made this course a very solid axle dominant course, which is where the IFS trucks, I don't want to say they struggle, but they don't have the steering angle and they don't have the forced articulation of a solid axle. So they're definitely not as good as a solid axle truck in the rock. So it's gonna be an interesting year. I think most years we go into with an advantage on the IFS trucks. I think this year the solid axle trucks are gonna have an advantage.
Okay, so also the thing with a single seat, let's check it out. That, like I said, there's so many things to talk about here, but how many of these races have you actually raced Ironman, like one solo without a co-driver?
Quite a few. So last year I raced this truck. Last year, just had a little bit different Bronco body on it. Last year was out in the lead and killed a rear drive shaft. So I ended up 7th last year in this exact truck, in a single seat truck. I've raced it. I've finished it a couple other times in my old single seat truck, and then raced throughout the season. Here is where a co-driver is really an advantage, being able to get out and winch and help you pick lines and that type of stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, the Campbells are all in single seat trucks. There's quite a few single seat trucks out here. It's so hard to build the perfect vehicle that does everything Ultra4 does. So we go endurance race in the desert, we go short course race at Crandon, you know, we go down to the Baja 1000, King of the Hammers. We have all these different variants, and it's kind of getting to the point where you need 2 and maybe even 3 separate race trucks, so that you're not building a vehicle that does all of it but doesn't do any of it great. And there's right now, you know, as the trucks develop and the technology develops, that's kind of where we're all at. We try to do all these things in one truck where we really need 3 separate trucks.
So I know that every race course is different, but like, for example, last year, how many times did you have to get out to winch yourself?
One time last year, and I probably could have driven up it. It was at the very end of the race, and I knew I wasn't winning the race, and I wasn't going to take any risks, so I just popped out and winched up the waterfall on aftershock just to make sure I didn't break anything. You know, wanted to get to the finish line at that point. That was my priority. Wasn't trying to win the race, and you know, spending 3 or 4 or 5 minutes winching the truck was worth it to get to the finish line. So.
Okay, there's just so much. All right, there's just so much to talk about.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the suspension.
For sure.
So tell me about the suspension.
So this is Paul Herschel's. He built the chassis. This is his design and his engineering into the front suspension. It uses a 10-inch, forward-based 9-inch center differential that's been narrowed on both sides, and then a CV flange goes in at the differential. And then we have a standard, bigger, beefier Series 30 CVs that are built by RCV in between both. But it's similar to like a normal CV IFS, like a Chevy or anything that is IFS that has 2 CVs on each end with a mid shaft and then stub shafts on both sides. So similar ideas, just a much beefier, gnarlier design based off of a Ford 9-inch center section. And then we use like a trophy truck rack and pinion. And that's where the big advantage, or one of the big advantages with IFS, is you have that mechanical connect to the steering on an IFS truck. So the control and the steering is substantially better. The solid axle trucks run a hydraulic ram on the front of them with steering lines and don't have a way to mechanically connect to that front axle. And so they, some of the people like Eric Miller have really pushed the hydraulic steering to a different level. It still will never be like a rack and pinion with a mechanical steering link for control.
Can we take a look under the hood?
For sure.
Jeez. It's crazy to me how offset the motor is. It's so weird to see it essentially in your passenger seat area.
Right, and so that was that kind of Pro 4 short course truck that inspired us a little bit to do that. Typically, like on Brocky with Vaughn's truck, you have to have the motor in the center so you can have a passenger seat, but everything gets taller. Your center of gravity gets higher. That's one of the advantages of the single seat truck, is being able to put the motor super low, essentially where your co-driver would be sitting. Your transmission, your transfer case, everything's sitting over there. So it's offset 10 inches from the center line, and the front drive shaft runs perfectly straight in. So it's one of those things that's give and take. That's a huge advantage, making a better race truck with your center of gravity and everything, but you give up that passenger seat. So it's all give and take with building Ultra4 trucks, and what you think is the best option. So
incredible. This is going to be so loud too, because it is so close to you.
It definitely is very, very loud. We have very good molded earbuds that noise cancel everything, because if not, your head would ring for a week after driving it.
Huh. And even up here, it looks like you have some spare parts, zip tied throughout here. What kind of spare things do you carry with you?
For the most part, the things that are vulnerable on the trucks that I carry with me is rear drive shafts. I choose to run a low pinion rear differential. A lot of people run high pinion differentials, but it's easier for me to get out and change a drive shaft versus trying to change a rear high pinion differential, which is substantially weaker than a low pinion. So there's kind of another one of those. A drive shaft took me out and potentially kept me from winning KOH last year. But Vaughn, he broke a rear differential and his race was over at that point. He did get it fixed, did get to the finish line, but it took the pit crew an hour or two to change a rear differential versus me taking 15-20 minutes to change a drive shaft out in the middle of the desert. I was able to get it done and get moving again.
So what else is here in place of a passenger?
Pretty much, so there's my dry sump oil tank. So you can see that holds 4 gallons of motor oil. And then the transmission's kind of tucked down underneath there, straight out of the back of the motor. And then the transfer case is sitting back here. And then the exhaust all tucks under, and you can see where the exhaust comes out the side too. So it's very full. There's not any extra room on these trucks at all. And we really have to get creative on packaging and making everything fit in here.
Okay. Wow. All right, let's take a look at the rear. So on your old truck, or on your old body, it was a lot easier to see a lot of the rear stuff here.
Yep.
But like the cooling system and a lot of stuff like that is kind of hidden behind the body now.
Yep, so the spare tire sits up on top of the fuel cell. And so the fuel cell is kind of built into the chassis and forms up into the back. And then, the cooling system is in front of that. And then we have some spare parts and tools and that type of stuff. So we're gonna have to get creative this year on how that roof and top is gonna come off and make that work. So
it's insane to me. So Are you able to change this yourself?
Yeah, I have to. I got to be able to change the tire by myself, absolutely. It's thing weighs about 140 pounds, and you got to sling it off of there, get the jack out, get the impact, do all that stuff. That's another one of those places where a second driver or a co-driver is very helpful.
That's like Loren just picking me up and just carrying me around for a little bit. Yeah, that is something else. Wow, that is just so crazy. And so like the fuel cell, how many gallons does this one hold?
This truck holds usable, has about 45 gallons. So I've got just shy or just right around 100-mile fuel range. Getting about 2.5 miles a gallon is usually what I figure on.
2.5?
Yeah.
But that's, what is that, an average over rocks and also on desert?
That's just what we figure the average out here at KOH is about 2.5, 2.6.
Huh, interesting.
So the rear suspension, you know, in the early days, we started with like a single coilover and a bypass on the axle. But as we got faster and faster in the desert and the IFS front suspension started to develop, we needed the rear suspension to be able to keep up with it. So now we're running very close to what the desert trucks, and the trophy trucks are running with a trailing arm suspension with a 2-to-1 motion ratio. Coilover, 4-inch bypass. This thing has a ton of suspension travel on the back. It's running about 26 inches. Some of the new trucks are running closer to 30 inches. And, it's super beefy and strong because it has to be able to take the beating of the rocks and give us all that articulation and keep it under control, but then also, keep us, planted. So there's, when we short course race, we'll put shorter limit straps on it and actually suck up the suspension a little bit because we don't need all that suspension travel when we're short course racing. So.
Is this another exhaust here?
Yeah, that's the driver's side. Comes out, tucks under the driver's seat, and then drops out right there.
Huh, okay. It's funny, the bump stop is bigger than most normal shocks on normal cars.
Right? Yeah, it's definitely got to be able to take that big G out hit.
So and then in terms of transmission, what are you using on this?
Yeah, for a transmission, so when we're racing King of the Hammers, we always run a Turbo 400, TH400. There's a couple different ratios that we'll play with throughout the year when we're short course racing and stuff like this, but at KOH, I like the standard ratio of the 248 first gear. And then the transfer case, you have to be able to shift into low range when you go into the rocks. So we run a 3-to-1 Atlas transfer case. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio anytime you're out in the desert. And then whenever we go into the rocks and we're climbing the crazy gnarly stuff, we shift into low range.
And so the Turbo 400, this is only 3 speeds.
It is, yep, only 3 speeds. And some people are starting to play around with sequentials and some of that other stuff. But for the most part, most people are still running 400s for transmissions right now.
This is really trick, the fact that the pumpkin is offset. Yep. So then you have a little more clearance.
A little bit, but you really have to be mindful of where that drive shaft's at all the time. So that's a product of us offsetting the motor 10 inches to be able to get the center of gravity down lower and everything. So that drive line has to get moved over 10 inches as well. So we don't have that drive line right in the ruts like the trophy trucks do if you're in the ruts, but with the rocks, you really have to be thinking about it all the time. You're driving through the rocks, my drive shaft is not in the center, it's over there. And I've like I said, I lost a drive shaft last year and it may have cost me the win. So one of those things I got to be aware of.
Yeah, it's something else though. For it being like this, you have so much awareness of where every single tire is. Right. And I think that so much of that just comes from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And even back to my playing days, back when this was just my hobby, it was something you really had to pay attention to, and your tire placement and how that was going to affect the chassis and the truck and what it was going to do with it. So it's just really, really important. And we have these, specifically built tires that Nitto developed just for King of the Hammers. They call these the KOH, the K specs. These are 40s. We actually have the first set of 42s we're going to be testing on the truck this weekend. But, just huge, thick sidewalls, puncture resistant, really, really important as we're crashing through the desert and crashing through these boulders to have, a good forged centerline wheel that can take that abuse and a great tire that has a great sidewall.
Well, good luck not this weekend, but next week.
Yeah, for sure. It's pre-running. I'll be racing the side-by-side, so I'll be racing the Polaris Razor, one of the new XP Pros. Great way to learn the rocks too and get into racing. And it's a great pre-run for me. I get to go run the course, in a race environment a couple days before the big race. So a lot of cool stuff.
Don't get too beat up.
Right? Yeah.
Wait,
for
so
sure.
that one you have to have a co-driver then?
Yep, I get to have a co-driver in that one. Yep, Jesse's my co-driver. Vaughn and I are building 2 new race trucks, so we'll get to see those 2-seat trucks here in the very near future too. So.
Well, good luck. We'll be out there chasing you as much as we can. It's essentially we have to run our own race to chase you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's only one way to get to the rocks, and that's to actually drive there.
Yeah, and then hike into them, right?
Yeah, and hike into them. Yep. All right, cool.
Thanks,
that's a wrap.
Larry. See you guys.